Well, good evening, everybody. Again, yes, it is Friday. Friday. And as we've been sharing already, let me just quickly say hi to everyone who's on the line with us, and a quick shout out and hello to those of you who are online on the internet at Spreaker.com. We want to say hello to you. It's a Freaky Friday, right? And the reason I say freaky because the weather's crazy here. As I was sharing with people before we started, yesterday I was out with my daughter preparing for her tryouts for today's softball. We were out. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. It was in the 60s. And today here we have snow and ice building up and coming down, and this nor'easter that's passing through. So again, it's just a crazy Friday. But I'm glad we're safe. I'm glad we're here. Glad to see everybody on the line. And just for those of you who are in the middle of that nor'easter, please be careful if you need to go out. If you don't have to, stay indoors, because the wind is probably the most dangerous thing, right? Because not so much that it can knock us down, but things are flying around that, tree limbs and loose things that could injure us. So please be careful. Well, as we begin a new series tonight entitled Life's Important Questions, we will attempt to answer questions over the next couple of days like, why do we exist? Is there a God? And why is life so unfair? And tonight, and listen, those are questions I'm sure many of you have maybe asked yourselves or have heard other people ask them of you, or you heard them being asked in general. And tonight we're going to begin with the question that many have asked, and I'm sure that many of you have heard before, and that is, why do we exist? Is it to make money, as many of us do when we go to work? Is it to party on the weekends? And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these things, making money and partying, right? We all should enjoy some downtime. Is it to bring pleasure to ourselves? Or is there something deeper that maybe we're missing? It is a question that has been asked numerous times before, and it is a question that unfortunately some were never able to come up with a satisfactory answer to it. And so they did the unthinkable. They took their own lives. And just to give you some stats I found pretty much astounding, according to the World Health Organization, close to 800,000 people die because of suicide every year. 800,000. That's nearly 1 million people, which comes out to one person every 40 seconds. Think about that. Every 40 seconds. While we're on this line tonight, how many people have committed suicide? Many more than that attempt suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds globally. And in the U.S. alone, it is estimated that 123 successful suicides happen every day. So again, these are for people who have not come up with that answer, or who could not come up with a satisfactory answer as to why they exist, why they live, why they were put here. So the reality is that people often ask themselves the question that we're going to talk about tonight. Why do we exist? Why do I exist? What in the world are we doing here? They will ask themselves things like, am I just a product of random selection, as Darwin would have me to believe? Are we just here because we happen to be the ones who survived some cosmic battle of the fittest? Or is there something more? Are we here living and breathing for a reason? Is there a higher purpose for our lives than what we've been able to find so far? Could it be really true that life is a gift from a loving God who created each and every one of us? And tonight I want to attempt to answer that question, because it is a question that needs to be answered. Because many of you will be asked by someone if you haven't already been asked, or it is a question that you may have been asking yourselves. And tonight I want to answer this question from distinctly from a Christian perspective, because I believe there's no better angle to answer it from, since I am a Christ follower. So, being open and upfront for those who may be listening at a later time, I guess you can say I'm being biased and I'm admitting it up front, but I'm a Christian. But we need to understand that the reason that I believe what I believe tonight is because I have asked this question of myself many times until I discovered the only answers that made sense, the only answers that satisfied those questions. And tonight I want to share with you the answers that I discovered, and my hope and prayer is that they would impact your life in the same way that they have impacted mine. So the first reason that we exist is to be loved by God. Ephesians 1:4 says, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight, in love." 1 John 4:16 says, "And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them." 1 John 4:10 says, "This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." And finally, Isaiah 53:5-6 says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." So my brothers and sisters, it is excruciatingly clear that we are here to be loved by God. He chose us while we were at our worst, both spiritually and for many of us figuratively. I know I was. And just quickly before I continue, I forgot to mention, I'm going to be sharing my testimonies. I mentioned with many of you, I haven't done this in many years. I believe my testimony is a true, powerful testament of what God can do. And for as many years as I've been doing this ministry, I've never shared it, but I just felt led. And I picked the date as March 30th. And I'll talk more about this in the coming weeks. But March 30th, please write that date down. Not so much to hear me, but hear what God was able to do with my life. For those of you who have people who are struggling with different things. So again, as I said before, God chose us when we were at our worst. And when you hear my testimony on March 30th, you're not going to hear about a man who was an upstanding member of his community or a good family man or someone who you could trust. No, you're going to hear about a man who, when God found him, was like a devil on a suicide mission, both figuratively and literally. A man who could not be trusted by friends or family, but yet God still loved me. And he loves all of us. Loves us so much that here we are, that we just read in Isaiah, that he sent his son to be pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. My brothers and sisters, only love could move someone to do something like that. Next, we exist to be a member of God's family. Ephesians 1:5 says, "He predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will." John 1:12 says, "Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." We exist and are called to be part of the greatest family there is, the family of God. You know, often when I watch TV, especially on CNN, they do documentaries from time to time on people or historical events. Recently, they did one on Patty Hearst. For those of you who don't know, who was the heiress to the Hearst family. They're a big publishing company. And as a young girl, she was kidnapped and she joined up with the Symbionese Liberation Army. And she robbed a bank with them. You can read more about her. But now they're advertising a special documentary on what they call an American dynasty, a prominent family whose name for decades carried immense weight and to some extent still does. The family I'm referring to is the Kennedys. Not only a prominent family, but a family that has suffered much tragedy and heartache. The assassination of President John Kennedy. The assassination of his brother and presidential candidate, Bobby Kennedy. The death at an early age in a plane crash of John Kennedy Jr. And there's so much more. Excuse me. And as popular and famous or infamous that this family may be, yes, they can be indeed labeled a dynasty, but they still pale in extreme comparison to the family of God that we are called to be a part of. The power and promises that come from being in the family of God can never be matched by the political power that the Kennedy family name has. And it is my personal belief that far too many Christians don't understand the enormity of being called a son or daughter of God. Far too many Christians take it for granted that we are in God's family. We must understand how important it is, the magnitude of that. Not everyone will be called a son and daughter of God. It is those who accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. Then we have that honor, that privilege of saying, I am in the family of God. Next, we exist to build God's kingdom. 1 Corinthians 3:9 says, for we are co-workers in God's service. Matthew 28:18 says, and Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Again, my brothers and sisters, we have been chosen as sons and daughters of God and commissioned with the most important task ever given to anyone. Listen, we see on TV, we read about it, we know. There are people who, because we're seeing it in the news, right? People in the administration of our president today can't get top security clearance. Because there are people in our government who are issued this top security clearance because they're given tasks. They're given privileges of being able to do things, to carry out things, to see things that not ordinary people can see. That's what top security clearance does. And some people who are given this clearance are tasked with important things that they have to do. In the same manner, we have also been given an important task as sons and daughters of God, and that is to build God's kingdom. And that's far more important than any mission that can be given to anyone in any government who has the most top security clearance imaginable. And guess what? We don't do it alone. Just as we read, right, in 1 Corinthians, we are co-laborers with God, not for nothing. I love my workers, my co-workers at work, and I'm sure many of you do too. Some co-workers, we can do without, but for the most part, we love our co-workers. They help us to get the work done. But my brothers and sisters, there is no greater co-laborer than God himself. He guides us. He prepares us. He strengthens us. And when necessary, he steps in, fights for us, and carries us. That's the co-laborer. That's the person I want to labor next to. And the building of God's kingdom is not with brick and mortar, like we see buildings being built today. And listen, watching a building being put together is a fascinating thing. But God's kingdom is built by the winning of human hearts. Sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ that causes others to want to join the family that we are in. That is how we build God's kingdom. We are, in essence, kingdom construction workers. All of us. Finally, we exist to bring God glory. Isaiah 43:7 says, everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. My brothers and sisters, we are being called. We are called to bring God glory in everything that we do. Just as we desire and expect of our children, for those of us who are parents, to bring us honor when they leave the home, in their behavior, in what they say, and in what they do, in the same way God has created us for the same purpose, to let others know of his goodness through us, to let others know of his immense love through us, to let others know of his mercy and so much more through us. That is what brings him joy and above all glory. And as we come to a close tonight, you may not have fully known when we began tonight why you exist. And maybe there's somebody on this line listening right now. Maybe there's someone else who might be listening to this recording at a later date. And you may not have fully understood why it is that you exist. Why did God put you where you're at today? Why did God bring you to this earth? Why did God allow you to live? It's a question I had many years ago. You'll hear that in my testimony. As a matter of fact, it got to a point that I didn't want to live anymore because I had no understanding of why. Why was I here going through all this pain and all this difficulty? But the bottom line is, I pray that now you fully understand that you were not put here just to be some lump on a log. You were not an accident. Let me say that again. You were not an accident. I know some people have been told that in their lives. You were an accident. You weren't supposed to be here. We didn't do the right thing. You were an accident. No, you are not an accident. You were put here for a reason and a purpose. You exist tonight, wherever you are, whatever time you may be listening to this. You were put here to be loved by God. You exist to be a part of the greatest and biggest family that there is, and that is God's family. You exist to help bring others to the knowledge of this love and saving grace, to help build his family. And finally, you exist to bring glory to the King of Kings and to the Lord of Lords as we come to a close tonight in prayer.